Hey everybody, Blue here from YGO Anime Games, and today I'm bringing you Leo's deck profile. So, Leo and Luna were twins, and they both played very different decks. Leo's deck is Morphtronics, so like dual monsters in disguise. So it's a really cool archetype. It's a little bit interesting the way it works. I personally relate the deck to actually Destiny heroes. So, Morphtronics are obviously machine monsters. But kind of the way that they play out, with many of them having, weaker attack stats, but effects that, when you get a combination going, can start to, start to put a board together. That aspect reminds me a bit of Destiny heroes. I know a lot of us are very used to the more aggressive Destiny heroes, but they're still in the Aster deck, all the weaker ones he uses, and he can use in combinations to great effect. So, I mean, that's just me. Obviously, the whole attack or defense position effect is very, very reminiscent of our Canna Force monsters. So, the Morphtronics are really cool, and then again, as I made the joke I made earlier, the entire monster lineup is, is based off, it's basically Transformers. His deck is pretty consistent, and, it's almost entirely cards that were actually played. Very few exceptions in this deck were cards not directly played. Some were seen through his deck. Again, Delta and I tried to avoid this, but on a case-by-case basis, we look through characters and say, what cards do we want to include that were shown in the deck? Especially when that is consistent between the sub and the dub, because sometimes the dub just puts cards in places, and it looks like it's a good card, but, it maybe didn't belong there. So I'm going to go with the deck profile, and the first two cards are the Gadget monsters, Gadget Driver and then Gadget Hauler. Okay, so obviously not the green, yellow, or red gadgets. They do work with the Morphtronic archetype. Obviously, that's what their effects do. But they don't have Morphtronic in the name. Also, as a result, they don't have the attack or defense position effect that is characteristic of Morphtronics. So, while part of the archetype, they have a more unique function. And in Gadget Driver's case, he allows you to switch the positions of Morphtronics in the field, which, again, activates their effects. So next up is Gadget Hauler, and you can just use Morphtronics to power him up. So again, the only two monsters that are Gadget something, and they have an effect that works with Morphtronics, but is not the Morphtronic characteristic effect of the attack or defense. One of the things that Delta and I have not been hugely pushing, although we have started, is since this previous Dexpo in July, which is our refresher point where we start reworking the channel and introducing, aside from new content, we're also working with face-up defense now. It's not something that, we're doing too much of, because you still want the element of surprise when you're set monster. But with Morphtronics, it's incredibly crucial, because now if I were to summon Morphtronic Boomboxin, I have the choice now to summon him in face-up attack or face-up defense, and then get either effect. So Morphtronic Boomboxin is next up. He's a one-of. Actually, we try to give a fair bit of these a one-of. Some are two, and there's at least a three. And it all was what helped to work to balance the deck out. Again, not just as far as quantity, because we try to be very careful with quantity. We don't like to flood decks with 3 copies of every card. But if the character really doesn't play much, we'd rather triplicate their cards than introduce cards that, were not played. And in some cases, even if it is the same archetype, because it's maybe a new card and just not something that we felt the character would play. So, Boomboxin's at 1. And so is Cameron. Cameron and, a bunch of them reflect kind of what I said earlier, where they remind me of the D heroes. Where some, not all obviously, but some of them have very, low attack points, but have these effects that, when you get a combination going, you can really stand and fight. And that's kind of what I ended up pulling out in that duel was, a combination of the weaker ones. And also, so Morphtronic Cameron and Gadget Driver now were 2 cards that were seen when Leo looks through his deck, but were not directly played. But because of that, in this case, we put them in the deck. Next up is Morphtronic Cellphon. So our first two as far as Morphtronics, definitely I would say, more of a signature of Leo. I think it's something that we saw, a bit more from him. But definitely cool. And again, it gets a special summon effect, and you look through your deck, so it gives you some options. Not as much so as like a Cyberjar special summon, but you could look it through up to 6 cards and then summon out, the one that suits you best. So definitely versatile, but again, that's his attack position effect, so it does come with the cost of having 100 attack point monster in attack position, but that's only if you don't synchro him out or boost him up. So next up is Morphtronic Lock-in. So again, a lot of the Morphtronics, and I keep saying, but more so than the Destiny Heroes, rely on lower attack points, but having effects that work to, special summon them or do damage, or the various things that these cards do. So, doing some damage is Morphtronic Datatron, 2 copies. Probably 1 copy of Morphtronic Lantron. Morphtronic Lantron is the only tuner in this deck that is of level 1, which makes it essential in summoning Lifestream Dragon, because you need a level 1 tuner with Powerful Dragon. Unless you were to use any other, any kind of, star level downgrade card. But as far as just throwing them together, there is no other level 1. So Morphtronic Lantron is definitely a keeper. So if nothing else, Lantron is essential for summoning Lifestream Dragon, which is Leo's Signer Dragon. So definitely, an instrumental part. And, even though Leo wasn't a signer until a little bit later in the series, this is his deck, which essentially does comprise the series. So unlike Yusei, where we can break it down more because of how much we saw Yusei play, Leo's deck essentially is one that spans, the better part of the anime. So, although we didn't see him in Season 1 with, Lifestream Dragon, it is in this deck. Alright, next up is not 1, not 2, but actually 3 Morphtronic Magnen. So, free for this guy. So Magnen, in attack position, he's picky about who he attacks. In defense position, your opponent must attack him. So having 3 of them, it does an okay job as, an attack bumper. So similar to Amber Mammoth in Crystal Beasts, if you have him on the field, he'll take the attack for any one of your Morphtronics. And again, so when you have Salphon with 100 attack points in attack mode, because you don't have anything to boost him up with, then you have Magnen. Alright, next up is Morphtronic Magnen Bar. Interestingly, him and the next one, Radion, are 2 of the non-machine type Morphtronics. They're both thunder types. So it makes sense though, one is a giant magnet. The next one is meant to be a radio. So it's a machine, but uses radio waves. I guess we'll round it up with thunder. Okay, they've lost me on that one, but nonetheless, still pretty cool. And he's an attack booster, so if you get him out, you can start to strengthen the weaker ones. And then this brings your whole team up a little bit higher, and then that's when, Morphtronics can start to make a better comeback, is when they themselves can now start powering each other up. Next up is Morphtronic Remoten. So, they're the ones with those really low attack points, but those, more interesting effects that we get from them. Next is Morphtronic Scope-In, so bringing up the other tuner. And now having the 2 tuners gives you a couple combinations to make Powerful Dragon, especially because the star levels of the Morphtronics range from 1 to 4, or even more with Gadget Hauler. But as far as the main ones go, the range of levels, having different level tuners is great, but again, there's only one of those will let you get to Lifestream Dragon. Morphtronic Stalpin is next. So, if you have to be afraid of a stapler. Next class we have Vacuumin, coming in at 0-0, the lowest. And last but not least is Morphtronic Videon, coming in with 1000, but the effect where in attack position or defense position, he gains 800 points for whichever position he's in per equip spell on him. So with a deck full of equip spells, he can easily start amassing attack points multiples of 800 or defense points multiples of 800. And that concludes his monster labs. Let's go to the spells now. Again, very equip spell heavy though. Break Draw. Double Tool C and D. Factory of 100 Machines. Junk Box at 2. Get that Morphtronic Recovery. 1 limiter removal, the nuclear option. 1 Mega Morph. You never really want to be in a position to use this, but if you are, at least you do get this effect. Followed by Morphtronic Accelerator. Morphtronic Cord. Morphtronic Engine. Power Pickaxe. And last but not least, Rocket Pilder. So, very equip heavy, and even more so than Joey, who, you know, kind of had a thing for equip spells, but even still, not even close to what we have here. And again, also, some equip spells support also was thrown the D Hero's way. So again, I mean, there's a lot of differences, but when I play through the Morphtronics, I still get a bit of a D Hero feel. You're going through the traps. 2 copies of Morph Transition. 1 copy of Morphtronic Bind. 1 copy of Morphtronic Monotron. Morphtronics Scramble. And again, with the whole Face of Defense thing, Monotron is a little bit less effective in this deck because we no longer need to summon it in attack position to have it switch to defense position. We can just drop the summon defense position. But it does help in cases where a monster is force summoned into a position that it would be otherwise vulnerable, or it's the fact that it's not what you were looking for. So next to last is Power Break, and the last card for him is Power Up Adapter. So the Morphtronic deck, definitely, I'd say, really cool in the archetyping, as well as also just, I think the way it kind of works together. It's, you know, to me, I keep saying it's not an unfamiliar feel. Also, I like the deck because it's a very consistent archetype deck. Again, we see this a little bit more, I'd say, in some 5Ds characters. Like we also saw in plenty of GX characters, but not always as much in the original anime characters where they would have more mixed decks. Yusei's deck, while being a lot of mixed cards, still has some underlying themes in it, but definitely this Morphtronic deck is incredibly well pieced together as being a very single archetype of a deck. So the extra deck is, of course, Power Tool Dragon, a very awesome synchro monster. I think very fitting into the Morphtronic archetype, and then of course Livestream Dragon, Leo's Silent Dragon, you know, his most boss monster in this deck as well. So definitely, you know, it's a cool card. It's a really cool deck. Interestingly, you know, it's obviously a very, you know, organic version of Power Tool Dragon, so a little bit creepy, I think, but kind of cool nonetheless. Anyway, my opinions aside, it's a cool deck. Leo's a pretty cool character, and definitely stay tuned for more Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds coming from this wave, as well as more awesome content from us in the future from a variety of Yu-Gi-Oh! Series and a variety of Yu-Gi-Oh! Topics. So, like, comment, subscribe.